Age and symptoms of perimenopause. So, hello to everybody and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited to talk about this topic today. And let's get started. So, age and symptoms of perimenopause, that's what we'll be discussing. So, do you wonder whether you might be experiencing perimenopause? Let's talk about when you might expect perimenopause age-wise and what the symptoms are. So hello to everyone. I'm so thrilled to be here. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Michelle Cooke and I am a period and hormone naturopath. I am also an emotion release technique practitioner and I'm a natural fertility educator. So I help women struggling with their menstrual cycles have easy, pain-free periods, hormone balance and emotional well-being. And I am the founder and director of a clinic based in Melbourne, and I see patients both online and face-to-face. So if you have any questions or comments as we go through the live today, I'd be more than happy to answer those for you. So just pop them in the comments box down below. If you're enjoying the content, I would appreciate you tapping those hearts and thumbs up so that I know that you're enjoying the content. Okay, so perimenopause is a stage in a woman's life, okay, when she's making that transition towards menopause. Okay, so she's not in a menopause yet, but she's making that transition towards that stage, okay? So this is when you will experience your last periods before actual menopause. And it is the final stage of a woman's reproductive life, right? Because once you hit that menopause, you're not ovulating anymore and you're not getting periods then. So it's the last of that kind of reproductive cycle of your life stage. So menopause is actually official when it's been 12 months since your last period. And there is not controversy, but there is kind of a different understanding of that now. So some people believe that menopause is defined as, you know, when you get your last menstrual period, you're in menopause. And then some other literature suggests that, you know, it's 12 months since your last period. So things and thoughts around it are sort of changing there. And I feel like the topic of perimenopause isn't discussed enough, and there's a lot of confusion and misunderstanding around what it means to be perimenopausal and typically when that would actually come to effect for you age-wise. So let's talk about it. So what age do you start going through perimenopause? So this really will vary from woman to woman. But on average, you will find that most women will be perimenopausal when they hit their 40s, okay? So typically when you're around 40 to 44, that's when you're sort of looking down the barrel of perimenopause. Not that it's a bad thing. I don't want to make it out to be, you know, a horrible thing, but I'm just having a little bit of a light-hearted laugh about that because some of us feel a bit like, oh, it's got the word menopause in there. You know, it's a different stage of life and it can be a little bit daunting for some people. Okay, and obviously there's always exceptions to this. So some women might experience perimenopause earlier than this, okay? So really, at the end of the day, you can get an idea of when you might be going through perimenopause and when you might be going through menopause based on what your mum has been through, okay? So typically, the same kind of pattern might happen for you or a similar pattern to your mum. So if you ask her, you know, when did you go through menopause or when did you start experiencing perimenopause, it will give you a bit of an idea. So this stage of life, this perimenopausal phase, can last anywhere from 2 to 10 years. So it's very variable depending on the woman, very different for each and every individual. Okay, so what happens in perimenopause? So it's a natural phase that takes place as a result of a decline of the ovarian function and the fluctuations of estrogen levels. Okay, and the production of estrogen and progesterone change as well. So it's all about the different fluctuations through that stage. So it's interesting because if you looked at literature in the past, the belief was, oh, during perimenopause, the estrogen levels are low, and that's why, you know, all these symptoms are produced. And obviously in menopause, we know that estrogen levels are low. Okay, so that was kind of the assumption that was made. However, sort of recent kind of understanding of it is actually that there is a decline in progesterone levels because you need ovulation to happen to be able to produce progesterone. If ovulation doesn't take place, then progesterone isn't produced. So there is, during perimenopause, there's irregular ovulation that's happening. So as a result, there's a fluctuation in these levels of hormones that are produced by the ovaries due to that. So it affects the hormones produced by the ovaries. It affects also hormones produced by the pituitary and the hypothalamus, which are two glands that are found in the brain. So it affects that as well during this phase too. Okay. Okay, and this is really the main reason why symptoms like this are appearing. It's actually due to that drop in progesterone. And the other thing that happens, interestingly enough, so you know how I spoke about the estrogen. So the recent sort of understanding is that actually when perimenopause first turns up on the scene, there's actually an increase in estrogen levels. So estrogen levels have been shown in some research papers to be actually 30% higher than what they should be. Okay, so isn't that interesting? So it's actually higher, not lower during this phase. Obviously, as we start to move closer towards that menopause, though, that's when the estrogen levels will start to drop. But initially, in the sort of early stages of perimenopause, you'll actually have estrogen that's elevated, commonly anyway. So there's a wide array of symptoms that you can experience in perimenopause due to these fluctuations, and it's important to note that estrogen and progesterone are actually involved in a lot of different body systems and regulations in the body, more than just, you know, associated with your periods and hormones. It goes well beyond that. So estrogen, for example, is involved in circadian rhythms, so our sleep-wake cycle. It's involved in sleep itself and quality of sleep. It's involved in body temperature regulation, moods, cognition, so your ability to concentrate and your memory, for example. High estrogen as well, we have to think that if we've got high estrogen there, this can be a contender towards stimulating histamine levels. So this can contribute to things like heavy periods, sore boobs, difficulty sleeping, and things like migraines and headaches as well can be an issue too, because estrogen is driving up this histamine in the body. Another phrase that's commonly used for perimenopause, which is very interesting, is it's often referred to as a second puberty. So that's interesting, isn't it? So quite often it's a matter of buckle up. It's a little bit of a rocky ride, not for everybody, but for some women it can be quite a rocky ride through this transition, but it definitely doesn't need to be. Okay, so let's talk about symptoms of perimenopause. So these again will vary from woman to woman, sorry. So, you know, some women don't experience much by the way of perimenopausal symptoms. It just depends. So, according to a research paper, they have suggested that in the initial stages, so in the early stages, you could have any three of the following symptoms. So let's talk about them. So you could have period or blood flow that is heavier, or maybe your period goes for longer than usual. Maybe your menstrual cycle is shorter, so perhaps it's less than 26 days. So it's kind of trimmed in a bit. There could be weight gain. So there might be weight gain there that's difficult to lose or difficult to shift, particularly around the midsection, so around the abdomen. So kind of like that spare tire kind of look, and you seem to be doing all the things and it's not really shifting, and that's due to these hormonal fluctuations. PMS mood swings. So this might be a new kid on the block for you. You might have not experienced this before, but because of this high estrogen, low progesterone scenario, it's cropped up its ugly head, and you're finding that you're having severe mood swings prior to your period. Okay. Or maybe you had it before, but it's turned up. The dial is turned up, and you're noticing that you're getting more irritable, cranky, like all those types of things mood-wise are escalated. Swollen or sore boobs can be another thing too, and that's typically due to the low progesterone levels as well. So that can be a thing, particularly prior to your periods. Menstrual cramps or pain, so that can either be a new kid on the block, maybe you haven't had that before and it's come up, or it's dialed up more than usual. Okay. Sleep issues. So like I mentioned before, the hormones are very important in regulating sleep, circadian rhythm, so sleep patterns. So you might notice a difference in your sleep-wake cycles. Perhaps you're waking up during the night, so in the middle of the night, or maybe you're waking up in the morning earlier than you would normally. Or perhaps you just have difficulty sleeping in general and you find it impossible to get that good quality night's sleep. That could be another issue. Night sweats, so that can be another one. Now this is quite confusing because typically night sweats are associated with a decline in estrogen, but remember initially you've got those high estrogen levels in the perimenopause. So that's a confusing one, and they're not quite sure why that happens. They're developing more of an understanding of it of recent times and trying to kind of nut that one out. So migraines or headaches, so that can be an issue because estrogen's driven up and often histamine's driven up. That can accelerate things like headaches and migraines. Either that can be a new kid on the block, or maybe it's dialed up more than what it should be. Mood changes, so we talked about that. More irritated, more flat, maybe you're more depressed, sad, perhaps there's depression there. All those things might come into play. Now, other symptoms, and these might be typically later on in perimenopause, so closer to actual menopause, when the estrogen starts to drop away. So you could get things like irregular periods, you could get hot flushes, sleep issues, so typically the night sweats and hot sweats. Low libido can be another issue as well. And periods might actually become a little bit lighter or shorter than usual. Maybe they're not as long as what you're used to. There can also be vaginal and vulval dryness as well. And this is due to the decline in estrogen levels, remembering that estrogen brings moisture and elasticity to the tissues there. So when that drops away, the support is no longer there. So there's a thinning of that lining and tissue there. There can be memory and concentration issues as well. So you can see there's, quite a misunderstanding about it. So it's important that we discuss this so that we know that actually this is the prequel to menopause and it can look quite different. And it's not necessarily an estrogen drop, but an estrogen rise And then in the later stages, there is that estrogen drop. So I've absolutely loved talking to you about this topic today. It's a real juicy one. Um, and I'll just check if there's any questions. Just let me double check. Oh, okay, cool. So I've got a question here. Second puberty. Yes, I can understand that. Yeah, absolutely, because it's just such a hairy ride. And because of those fluctuations in hormones and things like that, that's why, because when we think back to puberty, it's like your ovaries and hormones are on a bicycle and they're learning how to ride and learning how to operate properly. So, yeah, and there's often, crazy fluctuations there. So you can understand why that sort of comes into play. And the question there was achy bones. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Achy bones. Well, it's probably more so joint pain and things like that. But we do need to remember that estrogen and testosterone, for example, are important for bone health too. So that could come into play as well. This is probably more so towards the end of that perimenopause, when you're almost at that menopause phase, when those estrogen levels drop away. That's when you'll experience, joint pain and issues with the musculoskeletal structure. So yeah, thank you so much for that question. That's amazing. And if you're too shy to ask it, all good, pop it in the box down below, and I'm more than happy to answer that for you later. So if you would like support with your hormones and you think that you might be going through perimenopause, um, I'd love to help you. This is what I help with women with day in, day out, is hormone balancing, emotional health, getting their periods back on track. You don't need to put up with this. It's certainly not something that you've just got to grin and bear. And there's lots of things that can be put into place to help support you. So go ahead and book an appointment. If you're on Instagram, there's a link to do so in my bio. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, I'll pop a link down below so that you can go ahead and do that. If you're, just remember as well that all these Instagram and Facebook lives are on my website. So if you've missed any and you want to know what I've spoken about previously, go and check it out. So it's reproductivewellness.com.au/blog, and they'll all be there with the video at the top and all the written description underneath. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you. And if you're watching on my YouTube channel, be sure to like and subscribe and make sure you hit the bell icon so you don't miss any future videos that come out. And yeah, make sure you subscribe as well. So FYI, I'm here every Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time typically, but at the moment it's Australian Eastern Daylight Saving Time. And I'm here talking about things about women's hormones, periods, menstrual cycles, and all those juicy topics in terms of women's health. So I really look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining.